That may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Okay, we got some massive news. Please, please, please do not skip this intro. If you are in the Florida area and you want to come to the Fantasy Flock Network meetup, that is going to be on January 15th at 3 p.m. at Sparkman's Wharf in Tampa. I'll have Thomas throw the address up on the screen for everybody. Please be there. It's a small little thing. You should be able to find me. Should be really easy. And yeah, outside of that, make sure you go down there, drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel. Only if you play Dynasty Fantasy Football. I talk about this all the time. That's all you're going to find on this channel will be Dynasty Fantasy Football. Now, also, of course, if you want to go get in a Dynasty League with us, if you want to go check out our Dynasty Fantasy Football rankings, if you want to go get in a Dynasty League with some other members of the channel, if you want to get in our Dynasty group chat, if you want an in-depth podcast breaking down your Dynasty team, all of that can be found on one place, and that's going to be over there on Patreon. You can also find the link of that in the description of the video. You can find the link of that in the comment section as well. I think that should be it. Let's go through and let's talk about some Dynasty bounce back players looking forward to 2022. Now, I'm not coming out and saying every single one of these players is going to bounce back. We are going to go through and we're going to take just a case-by-case standpoint and talking about whether or not we think that we should be looking to buy low on player X, or if we should try to use the hype of this player bouncing back and maybe just sell them at a lower point, but before that floor just completely comes out from under them. And let's go into it, and let's lead it off with Russell Wilson at the quarterback position. Now, with Russell Wilson, I want to be completely honest. I have him in a lot of leagues. I went through and I told people to buy him low coming back after his injury this season. Clearly, we were wrong with that, as Russell Wilson has continued to lose value. And here with Russell Wilson, there's a lot of uncertainty with what's going to happen this upcoming season. I mean, right now, at the time of this recording, if I'm looking at a points per game basis, Russell Wilson is the quarterback 25. He's the quarterback 25 on a points per game basis. That is behind Tua Tagovailoa, Carson Wentz, Daniel Jones, Jimmy Garoppolo, Sam Darnold, Taylor Heineke. Wilson had by far and away the worst season of his NFL career. This isn't only going to show up in his fantasy statistics, but even if you look at the efficiency stats as a passer, now keep in mind, yes, the totals are going to be a little skewed because the Seattle Seahawks offense was bottom 3 this year in plays run per game. I mean, we kind of thought that the new offensive coordinator here in Shane Waldron, they were going to be able to come in and possibly speed the game up, make it look a little bit more like the Los Angeles Rams. The opposite happened. I mean, clearly, we were just bamboozled into this Seattle Seahawks offense. If you're looking at the adjusted yards per pass attempt that you had with Russell Wilson, I mean, it was right in line with what you had in 2020 as well. I mean, 7.9, 8.0. Now, the issue is, as we've discussed, it's more so the totals and how this offense wasn't looking to throw the ball at all. Now, projecting going forward, I don't know what to expect. Because with Russell Wilson, obviously this was a quarterback that there were stories circulating last offseason that he was possibly going to a new team. And with Pete Carroll being as old as he is, with the failure of this season for the Seattle Seahawks, where I mean, right now Seattle's 5-11. This is the worst season that Seattle has had in my memory. I mean, I think ever since Russell Wilson came into the NFL, they have to have finished better than this the majority of the years, right? Yeah, in 2020, they were 12-4, 11-5, 10-6, 9-7, 10-5, 10-6, 12-4, 13-3, and 11-5. This is Russell Wilson's first losing season of his NFL career. I don't know if he's back in Seattle. Now, what we have to ask ourselves is, if he does leave, where would some possible landing spots be? Because I've heard only one place rumored, and that was Denver. Now, if he goes to Denver and he is going into an offense that has Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton, Noah Fant, KJ Hamler, Tim Patrick, Albert O, a good offensive line, Javonte Williams, I think that Russell Wilson would be completely fine to bounce back. And the reason why I'm actually willing to go out there and bet on the bounce back from Russell Wilson is this is a quarterback that if you look at the decade-long sample that we have on Wilson, I mean, he's been playing since 2012. This was his first year in fantasy not being a top 10 option. Let me repeat that. This was Russell Wilson's first season ever not being a top 10 option at the quarterback position. And we have seen time and time again that these quarterbacks, they're able to play until they're 38, 39. In Tom Brady's case, 45 years old. Now, Russell Wilson's not Tom Brady. I don't think we can ever look at Tom Brady and assume that a quarterback's going to be able to make it that long ever again. But you can look at Rodgers. Rodgers is going to win the MVP this year at 37. I think that Russell Wilson can clearly go through and play as he has over the past 5 years, over the next 5. And I think that's a safe projection. 5 years in Dynasty is everything. That's a longer runway than you'll get with someone like Najee Harris, who's already 23 at the running back position. So I'm actually going to be going out there and buying low on Wilson. Now, I will say, just as a quick background on myself, one mistake that I used to definitely make back in Dynasty leagues, especially in like 2014, 2015, this is something that I would always do and I was very bad at it, is I would be so unwilling to move my rankings and to react, where I was always the guy going out there and buying low or going and buying the rookie that didn't produce year one, thinking that he was going to have the year 2 breakout. I was always the guy taking the discount. Now, I think that used to be a fault of mine and not giving up on a player early enough. And that's something that I want to get better at. And there will be some other players on this list that I'm cutting bait, I'm just letting loose of. But Russell Wilson won't be one of those players. And now let's go over to the running back position. We're going to stay in the same offense. Chris Carson. Now, if you're looking at Chris Carson in 2020, this was a running back that was, top 12. If you're looking at a points per game basis, because of course, you know that Chris Carson is always injured. He was the running back 11 right behind Austin Eckler. Now, this season, you only had 4 games from Chris Carson. And this is a running back. I'm willing to just cut bait. I think with Chris Carson, you should not be expecting anything going forward. He is 27 years old. This is a running back that has dealt with injury after injury after injury. Now, if you're looking at the contract that he has signed for 2022, now he is owed $3 million guaranteed, and he has about $7 million on his regular cap hit. So this team could save almost $4 million by moving on from Chris Carson. I'm not saying that's a guarantee, but you really need to understand the marketplace of the running back position. Just going back, James Conner signed a $1.75 million contract to go to the Arizona Cardinals this past offseason. So running backs aren't getting paid anything. And with Chris Carson, this is a long stretch of him coming out here and having injury after injury after injury. And if you possibly have to be worried about Seattle moving on from a franchise quarterback in Russell Wilson, not saying it's guaranteed, but it's a possibility. I think that there's a very small chance that Chris Carson is a 3-down running back in Seattle next year. I'm just cutting bait on Chris Carson. And I'm also cutting bait on this next running back. Neither running back I liked in Dynasty anyway, but Myles Gaskin. With Myles Gaskin, I know some people maybe were going to be talking about a bounce back. Myles Gaskin, this was his last year ever having a starting job in the NFL. Please, if you can go through and sell for a 2nd-round pick, do that right now. If you can take Myles Gaskin, a 2nd-rounder and a 3rd-rounder, and go get a 1st, go do it. Because here with Myles Gaskin, I know if you're looking at 2020, he was a top 10 running back on a points per game basis, averaging almost 17 points per game. Now, in 2021, yes, the stats are a little bit skewed here because this is a running back that dealt with, Malcolm Brown at the beginning of the season, Duke Johnson at the end of the year, and then he was just in and out, but he fell down to the running back 30. With Myles Gaskin, this is the, warning that we give all the time. These running backs that don't have the team investment, he was drafted in 2019 in the end of the 7th round. Yeah, he can come out here and he can be a running back 1 in fantasy one year, but the next year he can just get washed out and then never heard from again. That's going to be the tale of Myles Gaskin, and I think this needs to be a warning for some people going out there and just going all in on Elijah Mitchell. Ranking Elijah Mitchell over Travis Etienne in Dynasty. I understand why you want to do it. I understand why it's exciting. But remember, people are excited about Myles Gaskin, the 23-year-old running back last offseason. Now I think he's dead in Dynasty as well. Now our next player is going to be over at the receiver position. We're going to talk about Michael Thomas here. Now this is not a bounce back from 2020. This would be a bounce back from 2019. Now I'm with Michael Thomas. We talked about this in the wide receiver falling fast video, but I don't know how incentivized he is to go out there and play football, because obviously this is a wide receiver that the story was, he went out there and just completely avoided any kind of rehab that he would have had this past offseason. And that's what set him back. That's what made him end up missing this time. It wasn't necessarily the injury was that devastating. It's that Michael Thomas didn't care for that injury. And by the time that he tried to, it was just too late and he couldn't make it back. Now, if you're looking at the contract, he's definitely going to be with New Orleans this next season. I mean, he is guaranteed $22 million. And I mean, they only have to pay him $24 million. They're not cutting Michael Thomas for a $2 million savings. Now, with Michael Thomas, he'll be 29 this upcoming season. I think that if it's a full PPR format, I actually would be willing to bet on the bounce back from Michael Thomas, because I know a lot of people are going to be looking at him as a low-end wide receiver 3 in Dynasty. Let me run over to Patreon as I speak on this really quick so I can pull up my Dynasty rankings and tell you exactly where I have Michael Thomas and what players I'd be willing to go and trade for him. Because, I mean, I can guarantee you that there are some wide receivers I have ranked behind Michael Thomas in our Dynasty rankings that you can move for him. So I have Michael Thomas as our wide receiver 35, a wide receiver that I would easily go through and trade for Michael Thomas. I would trade Darnell Mooney for Michael Thomas if somehow you're able to pull that off. I would trade Robert Woods for Michael Thomas. I would trade Brandon Cooks. I mean, I would go through, trade Odell Beckham Jr. I'd trade Antonio Brown. I'd trade Tyler Boyd. I'd trade Allen Robinson. I'd trade Adam Thielen. There are a lot of names that I think you could go through and move for Michael Thomas right now. I know it's a real concern. If it's a non-PPR format, I'm not interested. But, I mean, in the PPR league, when he could get up there to 12 targets a game, I would be willing to just take the shot on a bounce back, because I remember taking him in about the 7th round of a best ball draft the other day in a live stream, and someone in the comment section went, "Oh, Michael, you drafted Michael Thomas, way too much of an injury risk." I was saying, yeah, I mean, Michael Thomas is an injury risk, but at the end of the day, that's why he's going in the 7th round in best ball formats. I mean, because if he wasn't an injury risk, he would be going in the 1st round. So you're getting that injury discount already baked into the price. And I think it's to the point where, honestly, it's worth just taking that risk because the upside is definitely there. And now our next receiver also dealt with an injury at the end of this year, his first season ever dealing with an injury. And that's why I'm willing to bet on the bounce back with him. That's why I'm willing to bet on the bounce back with Russell Wilson at the same time. This is DeAndre Hopkins. With Hopkins, I know we have had some pushback, people telling us that we are too high on DeAndre Hopkins in Dynasty, still having him as a mid wide receiver 2. I mean, I can see going through and taking someone like Michael Pittman, Hollywood Brown over DeAndre Hopkins. We have them ranked in the same tier. If you go check out our Dynasty rankings, they're by tier. So you really know the receivers that I would be willing to move for Hopkins in a heartbeat. I mean, those players include Brandon Ayuk, Elijah Moore, Mike Evans, Keenan Allen, and Amari Cooper. I'm going to go through and pull up DeAndre Hopkins. This is a receiver that I know has been dominant since 2013. With DeAndre Hopkins, he doesn't miss time either. So it seems like this is someone that, I mean, after watching him for how many games he's played in his entire NFL, over 100 games, that he should be 32 years old, that he's the same age as Julio Jones. No, he's 29. DeAndre Hopkins is currently 29 years old. And if you go over and if you look at the consistency that we have had from DeAndre Hopkins throughout his entire NFL career, it is to a point where I think that this season can clearly be chalked up to being a fluke. I mean, if we go back previously, if you're looking at the targets that he has had, I mean, 192, 151, 174, 163, 150, 160, averaging 10 targets almost every single season. Now, obviously averaging 10 targets a game. I apologize for that. And this year, he deals with a multitude of injuries. Obviously, I mean, he had the rib injury at the beginning of the season, which kept him out a few games and also made him play some games that he clearly wasn't healthy in, skewing his statistics. And then he had the injury that shut him down at the end of the year. I would be willing to look at the very large sample that we have from DeAndre Hopkins of him being a top 3 wide receiver every single season. The same thing can be said about Russell Wilson, and go through and bet on the bounce back there. I am always going to be the guy to go through and just take the shot on the older receiver, take the shot on the older quarterback, and sell the running backs at that same age. Okay. I want to get out on running backs too early, and I want to get out on wide receivers too late. I think if you do that, you're going to be a profitable Dynasty player. And then our next receiver is going to be Allen Robinson. We already discussed Allen Robinson on the video yesterday. This would be a case of if it was 2014, if it was 2015, I would be going through and I would be buying low on Allen Robinson. But in my older age, in my years where we've calmed down a little bit, I think that I may be a little hesitant to just go out there and run to the streets and battle it out on the trade market for Allen Robinson when he's a free agent this offseason. Now with Allen Robinson, the highs have been extremely high. I mean, you can go through, look at 2020 where he comes out, he has 151 targets, over 1,200 receiving yards. You can do the same thing in 2019 as well when he has 150 targets and almost 1,200 receiving yards. It's a little more up and down, however, than what you had with DeAndre Hopkins. And of course, with DeAndre Hopkins, I mean, he didn't have to deal with Blake Bortles. He didn't have to deal with Mitchell Trubisky. He didn't have to deal with Justin Fields. But I mean, still with Allen Robinson, if you're comparing his career to DeAndre Hopkins, there's a night and day difference where you have 3 peak seasons from Allen Robinson. And keep in mind, I started playing Dynasty in 2014. I love Allen Robinson. I love all those 2014 class of receivers. But for Robinson this year, it's hard to blame it on the injury that he had because that was at the end of the year and he was buns at the beginning of the season. Darnell Mooney was outproducing Allen Robinson. So it's not like we can just say this offense was so bad that Allen Robinson couldn't get anything going, because Robinson has been highly effective in very bad offenses in his past. So for him to come out and get outproduced on a per game basis by Darnell Mooney, even when he was healthy, that's going to raise some red flags for me. Now, I know Allen Robinson has a ton of name value. I know that he is a free agent this offseason, so I'm not telling you to sell him now. However, I'm telling you to wait until he goes into free agency and you get conversations saying, oh, is he going to Green Bay? Or is that how they're going to mend this relationship with Aaron Rodgers, is by going and signing a stud receiver in Allen Robinson? That's about the time you're going to sell. I mean, maybe you don't even wait for him to officially sign somewhere. Maybe you just let that hype go and then you cash out from there. I mean, if you could sell for like the 110, the 111, the 112 in a super flex format, that'd be fantastic. Maybe that's a little bit too rich. Maybe instead you're going to be getting an early second. I don't know. I'm going to be wiping my hands clean of Allen Robinson this offseason. And going over to the tight end position, we have a couple players to talk about. Let's go over to Logan Thomas. Now with Logan Thomas, I mean, this was a top 10 tight end last year. He was the tight end 16 on a points per game basis this season. Obviously, the issue with Logan Thomas is he just couldn't stay healthy. And I don't necessarily think that's something we can predict going forward. But at the same time, with Logan Thomas, we've seen time and time again, these one and done tight ends, these tight ends that come from nowhere, that it's not like they're, I mean, uber talented or anything. They step into an offense where there's just such a need for a player to go out there and run routes and draw targets that despite them not necessarily being the most talented guy, they're able to command a decent amount of volume. I mean, go look at Gary Barnidge in Cleveland. I mean, we could go season by season and we could just point out a tight end that, I mean, didn't really ever show his face again. I think that's the story on the wall for Logan Thomas. I mean, he's going to be 31 this offseason. I know he transferred over to the tight end position a little bit later, but we have to assume that Washington is able to go through and bring in more effective pass catchers this offseason. And he tore his ACL very late in the year. That has a massive impact. I mean, if you're looking at that torn ACL, if it happens, I mean, in the preseason, like what you had with someone like J.K. Dobbins, I'm not worried at all because he's going to have the 9 months of recovery. He'll be back by training camp. He'll be back by the preseason. But if you're looking at Logan Thomas instead, and you look at the timeline, he may be missing the beginning of the season. And if he's missing the beginning of the season for a player that's not uber talented, that's everything for Logan Thomas. Now, his contract dictates that he's definitely going to be with this team this upcoming season. I don't see it. I don't think this is going to be anything. As well as with our next tight end in Robert Tonyan, I'm also just going to go through, wash your hands of Robert Tonyan. Obviously, you're not getting much. I mean, I don't even know if you could go through and trade him. This was a tight end that, I mean, wasn't even that great in 2020, to be completely honest. Now, I know in 2020, he came out and he was very productive from a fantasy football standpoint, where he was a top 10 tight end, but that was just off of touchdowns. Is what we talked about coming into this year, that you had to fade that touchdown volume he had. I mean, he came out and he had 10 touchdowns off of 57 targets. He was averaging a touchdown on less than 6 targets a game. I'm sorry. He was averaging a touchdown per 6 targets. That is ridiculous. There's no way in hell that was ever going to repeat. I mean, with a tight end like Robert Tonyan, I think that you just go through and you assume that you have nothing going for it. I think that's another one and done tight end. But to recap this video, I mean, let's go through. Let's bet on the bounce back with Russell Wilson. Let's bet on the bounce back with DeAndre Hopkins. Let's bet on the bounce back with Michael Thomas, taking a very cheap discount. And Chris Carson, Myles Gaskin, Logan Thomas, Robert Tonyan, wash your hands, RIP. They're nothing anymore. Allen Robinson, we're going to say the same thing, but he is something. That's the one player you will get some trade value for, because I can go out there and I can say, oh, go sell Chris Carson. Who's that going to help? You're not going to get anything for Chris Carson. Mainly just telling you, please, for the love of God, don't go out there and trade for him. And I think that's all I got for y'all. Thank you so much, of course, for checking out this video. Please go down there, drop that like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, and you can go check out Patreon, where we have our Dynasty rankings, we have our Dynasty leagues, we have our Dynasty group chat, get an in-depth podcast breaking down your Dynasty team. And I think that's it. Hope you have a great day. Hope we get to see you with the video tomorrow.